Go ahead.
Thank you, Chair Huffman, Vice Chairman Hinojosa, and committee members. My name is David Yoskowitz, and I am proud to serve as the Executive Director of Texas Parks and Wildlife Department. With me is Mr. Reggie McGee's, our Chief Financial Officer, and we have other colleagues in the room that are available here as resources. On behalf of myself and the 3,100 employees that serve Texas every day, we appreciate and thank you for their continued support for the agency. Our footprint and impact would look very different today had it not been for members of this committee. You and the voters of Texas not only supported the constitutional dedication of the sporting goods sales tax in 2019, you also established the Centennial Parks Conservation Fund last session. These historic pieces of legislation have transformed how we serve Texans and will ensure the state's treasures will be protected and available in perpetuity for public enjoyment. We believe that our legislative appropriations ask for the 26-27 biennium advances our mission to manage and conserve the state's cultural and natural resources of Texas to provide hunting, fishing, and outdoor recreation opportunities. The department's initial LAR submission for the upcoming biennium included a base funding request of roughly $1 billion and 8 exceptional items totaling $230 million. We have aimed to address key strategic funding priorities within base limits. Senate Bill 1 is introduced made the following changes to our base request: a reduction of $43.5 million tied to one-time items, including base limits, which were repurposed by TPWD, and the addition of the $1 million in general revenue for directed local park grant. One of the key issues framing the development of our LAR has been ongoing concerns with the game, fish, and water safety general balances, or as commonly known as Fund 9. Current evaluations indicate that existing funding mechanisms will fall short to effectively support conservation and recreation efforts over the long term. As such, most of our exceptional items request general revenue appropriations in lieu of Fund 9. We currently estimate that our general Fund 9 expenses will outpace revenues by roughly $20.7 million per year, with balances projected to go negative in the 2028-29 biennium due primarily to increases in operating and salary costs, including fisheries and wildlife management and conservation, hunting and fishing activities, and game, fish, and water safety law enforcement. One approach to shore up Fund 9 while the department works with this committee and stakeholders is to develop a long-term plan for the health of the fund would be to shift a portion of the funding for LE division activities from Fund 9 to GR1. This change would reduce the agency's use of Fund 9, restoring balances while not negatively impacting LE operations. This is only one approach, though, and we look forward to working with you on finding ways in which we can continue to deliver on our mission, recognizing the increased demand for recreational opportunities into the future. We are requesting funding for the following revised exceptional items: non-law enforcement capital transportation vehicles on page 4 of the summary, $14.8 million. Vehicles, as you can imagine, are essential to the department operation across the state. 75% of our staff work in the field. And as a department, we drove over 25 million miles over the last 2 fiscal years. There is a need for critical capital repair and improvement at headquarters, which is on page 5. Our building is nearly 50 years old and is in dire need of repair, renovations, and upgrades. Repair backlogs and emergencies have resulted in disruptions to daily business at headquarters. Capital construction and repairs on page 6 would reinstate $13.9 million of state parks, fisheries, and wildlife-related capital construction projects that were reduced by LBB recommendations due to the removal of the repurposed one-time amounts. Employee compensation, noted on page 7, remains a strong priority for the agency. The department is seeking $25.1 million to provide targeted salary actions for classification titles where salaries are below the same classification titles at other natural resource agencies and within the department itself. We also wish to expand and modernize game warden and state park police presence, which is noted on page 7 of your document from the department. With growth in population and calls for service It's important that game wards and state park police officers have the tools needed to achieve their mission. This request would add and outfit 20 new game wardens and support staff, enhance and modernize technology used by all game wardens, repair and upgrade our game warden training center, and allow the agency to implement a 50-hour work week. Agency technology modernization on page 8. This is an exceptional item request of $7.75 million for needs to increase cybersecurity capabilities and create efficiencies and better external and internal customer service. Conservation of fisheries and wildlife resources on page 9 would use $4.4 million dedicated Fund 9 sub-accounts to grow hatchery production of flounder, expand public hunting and fishing opportunities, enhance fish habitat, and keep our freshwater fish hatcheries facilities in good working order. And the department seeks enhancement of the Texas Farm and Ranch Lands Conservation Program, which is on page 9. This $30 million would provide grant funds to purchase voluntary conservation easements on working lands that have high values for water, fish, wildlife, and agricultural production from willing participants. We appreciate the legislature's past support and assistance, and I and the team are happy to answer any questions that you may have.
Thank you. Senator Hall.
Thank you, Madam Chair. How much parks spent to date chasing CWD?
Chairman, Senator, I have the numbers for the last 7 years, and those numbers are 16.8 million, where about 75% of that comes from the federal government.
Okay, and
16.8 million.
How much are you asking for this biannum?
We would continue on with that same amount.
Okay.
So the recent fiscal year 24 was $4.1 million, and we'd be continuing on with that, essentially that same request.
Okay. And so what is your goal with the program?
Yes, Senator, our goal is to keep the prevalence of CWD on average across Texas at 1% or below, and that's currently where we exist.
And when do you expect to achieve that?
We're currently there, and we wish to continue to keep it there.
Okay, so what you're talking about is 16.8 million forever.
That was the total for the last 7 years.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Let me ask it again then. You're asking, going forward, what are you asking for the biennium?
For the biennium, it would be
4.8 million.
4 point.
We have 4.8 million in the base.
Going forward.
So you're asking basically for 4.8 million biennium forever going forward.
For the next biennium.
But, okay. When do you expect to achieve your goal? And you talk about maintaining, and so to me, maintaining means I'm going to keep doing what I've been doing where it is. Do you have a point in time in which you say, we have eradicated CWD and we no longer need to spend taxpayer money?
Yeah, Senator, unfortunately at this point, there's not a way to eradicate CWD. There's not a cure for it. So our mission is to continue to control it, keep it at extremely low prevalence.
What you're saying is we can expect this, every biennium, to continue with this.
I would hope at some point in time there would be a cure, and I would hope at some point we wouldn't have to be.
What is your plan to get there?
Our plan is to get to and hold the 1% prevalence rate. Yeah. So we work off of a CWD management plan. That's an adaptive plan. I've asked our team to, now that we've had additional changes in code and rules that the commission has recently adopted, to revisit that management plan and really make it a response plan, which I think is appropriate. And to continue, the goal is to continue to keep prevalence across the state at 1%.
And we need to do that, considering Texas spends somewhere between 10 and 50 times as much as any other state spends on this issue.
Senator, I don't have those figures of other states in front of me, but I'm happy to get that to you.
I
haven't.
That's why I asked the question.
Okay.
Because we've stepped out where others haven't. But I'm also concerned about the impact to the state.
Your name and then.
roughly from 2012 time period, we had about 3.6 million deer. And today we have 4.7 million deer. And in that time frame, we've hunted out 9 million. So that sounds like a really healthy deer herd. In
That
the
is-
time frame that you've identified before, that CWD started before that, and so we've had it all through there. And so I don't see any indication of where we're having a problem, like most other states, of losing herd size. But in that time frame, with the program you've had, in 2012, we had a thriving deer breeding business, probably about $5 billion business, that today is less than half of that. Our economy has taken a hit of a significant amount. But that's not the only area. I've got letters from landowners who were victims of the surveillance zones, containment zones, telling them that their property has gone from being very expensive property to basically worthless in every area. And so, Madam Chair, I'm asking this because I think we have a responsibility not just to manage and monitor how we're spending taxpayer money, but to allow things to happen that have damage to other people. And that's what we've experienced. It's real. And so my concern is, and there was talk like, oh, we got rid of the surveillance zones and containment zones in the last revision. Well, the damage was already done in there, but they didn't really go away because you picked another way without using the words to have them in there. So I am concerned that we've got something that, and I've asked the question many times, I'll ask you, how many deer have died of CWD?
Senator,
World?
CWD is a prion disease, and the way it manifests itself is by creating voids in the brain. Those voids then lead to compromised mobility, cognitive functions for the deer, and so in many cases, the deer die of other things before they even die of the disease itself.
So we don't know.
Well, we have, to your point, which I think is a great point early on that you made, was that we've increased deer herd across the state, wild, low fence, from 3.7 million to about 4.4 million. That's the sign of a healthy herd, and that's happened because we've been able to keep CWD prevalence low at 1%. And so it is very difficult on the low fence wild landscape to identify deer that have died of CWD.
But you're concerned about deer dying. We got over 300,000 post-mortem tests that have been run from your data, and of those, 0.18% tested positive. 0.18%. 300,000 that were killed to be tested. Seems to me the real threat to a deer in Texas is more Parks and Wildlife in their post-mortem testing than it is anything else, because we only had 73,000 deer killed on highways and accidents. That doesn't seem to make a lot of sense to me. And we had other instances in there. I'm concerned about the science because Parks seems to has shunned folks outside of parks that have some real knowledge and have tried to contribute to it in the understanding that I have a study here that shows that the live testing that you have actually contributes to the transmission of CWD. And in the time frame of 2015, roughly, when you required all of the live testing, where you sent veterinarians from ranch to ranch, testing deer after deer without sterilizing the instruments, a year and a half to 2 years later, we had a jump in the number of CWD positives occurring. And also the fact that about 25% of the deer died just because of the invasiveness of carving a piece out of their rectum or out of their throat for the live testing. And there are other people who erected other operations that you would redirect how you're doing this so that you don't damage the economy. And so I'm concerned with continuing to fund something that is hurting our economy and has shown no meaningful results. I mean, you had the Kerr facility, had one suspected positive. You killed all 66 deer. Not one of them tested positive, and even the suspect positive wasn't positive. So I'm not sure you have folks in there that really understand what they're doing. And when they really come, you got an agency with a lot of good people in it, no question about it. Dedicated, hardworking, want to do it, get the job done right. And they're concerned. You have people that are concerned about it, because they won't come up and speak to you, but they will speak to others when they ask one of your lead veterinarian biologists, how long are we going to pursue this thing? The answer they got was, we're going to pursue this till we put every deer breeder in Texas out of business. I just don't think that's the way to run a program. And I hope going forward that you'll use some of this money to bring in some outside experts from Texas A&M and others who have written papers, and provided lots of good guidance on how to better manage this to actually achieve a goal, not just guessing at it.
Thank you, Senator, for bringing that up. And in fact, we're very proud of our partnerships with our academic and research colleagues. We have working relationships with Texas A&M, Texas Tech University, University of Texas, Cesar Claiborne Wildlife Research Institute at Texas A&M Kingsville. So all working on CWD with us. So thank you for bringing that up. That's really important to us. Absolutely.
Okay.
That's it. Senator Campbell?
Thank you, Madam Chair. So you've told us this, my question is also about CWD, but you've gone to now population less than 1% with CWD, chronic wasting disease.
Prevalence on the wild landscape, less than 1%. That's correct, Senator.
Okay.
Yes.
Whitetail can get this also, right? But there's a plethora of whitetail. Are you managing whitetail? Are you finding it in whitetail? And are you monitoring and managing that population of deer?
That's correct, Senator. In fact, white-tailed deer are at least at this point, given the plethora, to your point, of white-tailed deer across the state, are the main carriers of CWD if they have it. But also mule deer carry it, elk carry it, and other exotic species can. That's correct, Senator.
Well, there's enough whitetail out there that they cause car wrecks so much, but that's definitely a tangent off what I wanted to ask. But there is concern, some of the ranchers that want to raise exotics, that they have a big hit taken out of their herd. So so the management and monitoring strategy is to just cull out, isolate, wait, watch, or because they can be sick of something else before the pyron virus, the little tiny virus, is detected?
Well, Senator, for exotics, that falls under the Animal Health Commission. I believe you're meeting with them next. But yeah, the key to management of CWD, until hopefully at some day we find a cure, which would be great, would be to early detection, response, and then keep it at the low prevalence rate as possible. A big part of that also is, we as responsibility as hunters in the state. And I think it's, in order to keep a healthy deer herd across the state, you need to have active hunting as part of that. And so a big part of what the department is doing is trying to engage more hunters to get onto the landscape, to be part of the solution of keeping deer herds in a healthy state. So
thank you. So
maybe
they can shoot more with their permit or start it earlier.
Well, MLD programs yes. Absolutely.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Senator Flores?
Thank you, Madam Chair. And so, Dr. Yaskowitz, what's the economic impact of deer hunting in Texas?
$9.6 billion. Natural Resources Institute at Texas A&M did a study and calculated 9.
Part of this whole conversation, of course, for finance or natural resources. And it has to do with what's the end game. The end game is that this is something cultural, that this is something worth $10 billion to the economy and trickle down. It's something very important to our rural counties. So we need to work together to make sure we have that. Let me ask you a question on one of your riders to get back to the issue of the budget. So you're talking about on capital transportation of vehicles. So you have a replacement schedule on your boats. This is the same question I asked DPS, by the way. Yeah. Your normal replacement schedule for your vehicles and boats, is this a request based on a normal schedule?
The exceptional item request for the, what we're finding is that we're having to run our boats and our vehicles a little bit longer. And so this is just a normal rotation for the capital transportation.
Okay, my point, I guess where I'm getting here, the question is does this request take into account all the boats and the trucks that are being used in border security that are actually probably 2 or 3 times accelerating the replacement schedule? They're being used and run 2 or 3 times more than your normal replacement schedule. So the same phenomenons with DPS or anybody else responding to our border security. You're planning for 5 years, but in 1 year's time, 1.5 years' time, you've run the miles up on it, or the boat has been used and the prop is turned that 2 or 3 times more quicker than your normal replacement schedule. So I guess what I'm asking is, in light of that, is this sufficient to keep up with your capital equipment request for transportation, i.e. boats and trucks, which are necessary for you to do your mission out in Texas?
Yeah, thank you for that, Senator. Yes, our game wardens put a lot of wear and tear on the boats and trucks, especially along the border, as you note. Obviously, we have some of our expenses reimbursed by the governor's office for that work. But as those boats transition back to the counties or the facilities that they were at before being at the border, we need to make sure they're in working condition. And if they're not, then we need to replace those so that the game wardens have and our police officers have the tools and equipment that they need. So in this particular case, I'm going to look to Reggie here in terms of the replacement.
For the record, Reggie Pegues, Chief Financial Officer. This exceptional item is only for the transportation items that were pulled out of the base bill, the 14.8. To answer your question, within our base submission, we do have amounts for boats and those other items for law enforcement and other parts of the agency. This is just only for the items that were pulled out as an exceptional item.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure that the agency in their budget request is keeping that in mind. And when you do have reimbursements, would you need some capital authority or rider to be able to use that money to purchase equipment that has been worn out in an accelerated manner?
Senator, I think we're in a pretty good position right now, but I'd like to get back with you and talk with our team about if we'll need that additional authority. Yeah.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Yes, sir.
Thank you,
Senator West.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. Just a couple of questions. When the department purchased property and there's a cemetery on the property, is there a particular process that you go to make certain that you maintain that cemetery?
Yes, Senator, we take that very seriously. If there is an established property on that cemetery, we have a cultural resources program within state parks that will do an assessment of those cemeteries and then take action to protect those cemeteries. I would like to ask Rodney Franklin, our state parks director, to come up and maybe delve into, if that's okay, Chair.
Madam Chair?
Madam
Yes.
Chair.
That's fine. Oh, no, no.
For the record, Rodney Franklin, State Parks Director. And to your questions, Senator West, when there's a known cemetery on a piece of property, as Dr. Yaskowitz mentioned, our historians and our cultural resource folks make sure we learn as much as we can about that area and do the history, and we take steps to protect that.
Yeah, and I don't need just a dissertation on it, but just generally, what type of steps do you take?
Well, first of all, I think the main thing is locating exactly the boundary of the cemetery, locating the number of sites that are at the cemetery, and doing some history on the families that were buried there.
And then you preserve that cemetery.
That's correct.
Okay. This may be your question or not, but let me ask the executive director. In terms of metropolitan areas, let me back up. What funds are you using? What's your funding source in order to purchase for a new land, the new parks?
Currently, Senator, we have the Centennial Funds, which we have now $49 million of interest on top of the $1 billion. We also have from Senate Bill 30, last legislative session, $125 million for land purchases. So currently, the $125 million for land purchases is what we're using to purchase land for new state parks, and then they'll become centennial projects to build out those state parks.
The Senate Bill 30, was that it?
Last session,
Last
I'm sorry.
session, okay.
I'm sorry, yes, last session.
All right, and in terms of metropolitan areas, are we looking to our metropolitan areas and making certain that we're buying more land for parks in the metropolitan areas?
Absolutely. Our major focus is the Texas Triangle and the Valley, where we see the most rapid growth in the state. And so we're concentrating much of our effort there, Senator, but we do not want to also ignore those opportunities that might exist out in West Texas or in the Panhandle or deep East Texas that would be destination places for families to go and spend a week.
Okay.
But to your point, yes, its main concentration of our energy is within that buffer around the Texas Triangle.
Do you have like a lot of organizations have 10-year plans, 20-year plans? Do you have a plan in place as it relates to purchase of property for parks?
We do, Senator, and that is dictated by the funds that we could expect to roll off of the Centennial Parks Conservation Fund. So if we assume around $45 million a year, that determines how much we can purchase in land and then how much we can build out. So right now, as we move through the process, we're looking at given land prices, and we all see what land prices have done in Texas, have increased rapidly over the just last couple of years. It's looking like for a full Centennial Park, just with using the interest, be about one every 4 years or so. And then we have other parks in process now using sporting goods sales tax that will be coming online.
And that's a part of an overall plan that your agency has.
That's correct.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Yes, sir. Senator Hinojosa?
Thank you, Madam Chair. First, thank you for the work you've done in South Texas. Besides responding to requests by ranchers and farmers, you now have more responsibility because of border security. So you have moved more agents into South Texas. And in the past, we have received concerns about some other regions of the state not being covered or protected or having enough game wardens to respond to any ranchers or farmers out in the other regions. Have you increased the number of game wardens statewide?
Senator, we have not in recent time, definitely not since I've joined the department over close to coming on 2.5 years. Our footprint with Operation Lone Star is about 25 game wardens, state park police officers every week, which is a wave. That's down from what it was, but when they do leave their counties, if there's not backup there, then they do leave a void. Hopefully we can backfill with other game wardens, supervisors, but it's not ideal. Ideally, we'd like to have those counties fully staffed, even if game wardens are on deployment. So we are asking in this LAR for an additional 20 game wardens, as you had heard me mention just a moment ago, to begin as we build out Texas as a more population, more calls for service. We're going to need that in addition just to meeting our primary mission.
And besides responding to border security, your game wardens are out in the ranches where many events like smuggling, human smuggling takes place in terms of smugglers from Mexico from the border coming across the ranches and the farms.
Yes, Senator, we are on the river, and we're on the lakes, and we're on private property, and we do come across that, and so we're working with our federal and state partners in order to address those issues.
And one other responsibility that you have that sometimes we forget or don't pay as much attention is you also guard the coastal waters in terms of illegal fishing.
Yes, Senator, that's a lot of water, both offshore and then also inshore, and we are adding this committee, this legislature last session provided us with 2 new aircraft that, in the first time in a long time, we will be able to get offshore and use technology to identify those launches that are coming in from Mexico, getting our red snapper, taking it back to Mexico, and trying to sell it back to us. So we will have that additional capability coming up later this year.
As a matter of fact, I think last week you caught a boat from Mexico having 2,000 pounds of redfish.
That's unfortunate.
Yes.
Yeah.
Just a couple more questions. You have been very responsive to assistance from Parks and Wildlife for parks funding, and it's been very, very helpful. But you also work very closely with the State Aquarium in Corpus Christi, which is, I understand, your hometown, or used to be.
Yes, and you're my senator.
And you all have worked very closely with the State Aquarium, but also other groups in terms of rescuing turtles.
Yes, I mean, as my time in my previous position, living most of my life in Corpus Christi, I was able to really see how the Texas State Aquarium, Texas Parks and Wildlife, GLO, federal parties really got together, and in particular with sea turtles, Senator, really got the process down in terms of being able to rescue sea turtles and then release them successfully. And this last freeze event, we had, believe statewide, we had maybe over 1,700 turtles that were rescued. And in fact, I had the opportunity last week working with the State Aquarium to be able to release some of those turtles back in the water out on the beach there in Corpus Christi. So it's a really important relationship with the Texas State Aquarium.
Oh, thank you for your work. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Senator.
Senator Zaffarini?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Sir, going back to CWD, you're asking for only $4.8 million in all funds. How much of that is state funds?
Those are 4.8 million. Dean, just
1 million. 1 million of state funds, 3 of federal.
yeah. So we get it.
And what would be the economic impact on the deer industry of not implementing that program at that level of funding?
Dean, I'm not sure I can answer that question other than if we were to not be able to do that work, it would be definitely an impact on being able to monitor and respond to CWD, whether it's in the wild or in captive breeding facilities.
Thank you so much. On page 10 of the LBB document, we have information about the FTEs that you are requesting. Would that number of FTEs funded at that level enable you to keep our state parks open with sufficient hours to please the public? I know we had complaints years ago. I haven't heard any lately. And to fulfill your mission related to Operation Lone Star?
Yes, Dean, that the biggest part of that FTE request is for our state parks, being able to manage and add additional staff to current state parks, which are understaffed. But we're also looking at opening 2 additional parks this year, and then 1 at least every other year going forward. And so this request addresses that need, and we want to make sure that we have the staff in place to really have an enjoyable opportunity for our state park visitors.
Well, good. That'll make a lot of people happy.
Yeah, thank you, Dean.
On page 5 of the departments of your agency's document, number 4 is critical capital repair and improvement needs, headquarters. Why would you be interested in renovating and restoring this place instead of moving to a new facility?
Well, Dean Zaffarini, I think in talking with the team, and there is that possibility, but trying to be good stewards of the state resources, the infrastructure team, feels that the bones of the building are good, but the building wasn't designed for how we work today. And so we feel like that would be the most prudent use of state resources, is to stay in that same place. Moving would be, especially with land prices and building costs within the city or surrounding Austin are much higher than when we'd be able to do in terms of renovation at the current building.
That makes sense, thank you. And thank you for the work of your game wardens. One of them was so good, he became chair of criminal justice in the Texas Senate.
I've heard about that.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Senator Nichols.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I was gonna, the dean said we're gonna go back to chronic wasting disease, so I'm gonna say the same thing. I'm gonna go back. I understand a lot of what Senator Hall's talking about. I get a lot of complaints as well from the deer breeders in the fact that when we test the whole herd and we kill the whole herd to find out that the herd was healthy. It's real sad when you find that out. And I thought a few years ago they were getting close to being able to test without killing. Is there no progress in that area?
Yes, Senator, so you're referring to, well, we do that now with our antemortem tests. So we're able to test deer without killing them, and that uses a rectal sample from the deer, and that's how we do most of our testing.
So when do we transition from killing every deer till now we can test them without killing them?
For movement, I would have to ask the team here. Just a sec. Sorry, Senator, 2015, around 2015 is what I'm being told we moved.
No, you're saying in the past decade we don't go in and 100% kill a herd?
No, I'm not. This is for antemortem testing to be able to move deer. I'm not saying that postmortem testing doesn't take place. I'm saying antemortem testing came on around 20.
If the deer breeder, if there's a concern that the deer breeder's herd might be infected, can we test that herd without killing all the deer?
If there is no detection in that deer herd, we wouldn't kill the herd. I think.
Well,
I may be missing your question. I'm sorry, Senator.
Well, I thought they were having to kill the animals one at a time to test them to see if they've got it, and then they can go through an entire person's herd and find out that they really had no infection.
Is this is this in a positive facility? In a positive facility where we have detected that?
An area where they go in. I'm talking about the deer breeders.
Breeder facility.
Yeah. Yeah, positive facility where we have detected the disease. We would go through a process and working with those deer breeders to hopefully not put down the herd. That's not our desire. So there are processes in which we can create a herd plan where we would work with the deer breeders in that case to work through the disease to get them to a point where they could eventually be then movement qualified to be able to ship deer.
I had also heard some horror stories that Senator Hall was talking about, but I will tell you, for those that are not that familiar, I've got a ranch up in Colorado in the northwest part. I've been going there since I was a kid, and abundant wildlife. And Colorado Parks and Wildlife watches after that thing. And when the University of Colorado brought those sheep in, and then that wasting disease jumped over to the deer without them realizing it, the deer got out. It ran rampant through that state. It was the most destructive thing I've ever seen with a deer herd. And then it went from the deer herds to the elk herds. So now the elk have it. And, it scares me to death. I've actually witnessed this happen over several decades. And our herds were just wiped out. Where I used to go out in the pasture and see 100 deer, I mean, if I can see 2 or 3, I feel lucky. And it has hurt their hunting up there. where deer used to get several tags all over the counter. Now they ration buck tags, which really makes the locals mad because they have to ration them as well. And they're getting under control now, but they still haven't got it. And y'all have been holding it back. It's kind of what I'm saying. And thank goodness that y'all have been holding them back, because if it went through Texas like it went through Colorado, it would be disastrous. The other secondary concern is that if it'll go from sheep to deer to elk, then it could also jump into cattle, which cattle is a big industry in Texas. If it jumped into cattle, it would just wipe out many ranchers out there. And we also have sheep herds out there. We know it went from sheep to deer, and it's certainly a hot back. But we also, and I know animal health is next, so we're going to get into part of this, fear of other diseases coming across the river. That river, the one that goes to the Gulf of America.
Yeah.
The second thing I want to bring up was the quality of your game wardens. You just held in very high regard out there. So y'all have done a great job of recruiting and training, and hats off to you on that. On the boats, I know, you wear out vehicles and you wear out boats. Replacement of vehicles is a pretty common thing. On boats, can't you just replace the motors? I mean, the hulls on those things aren't worn out.
They do get worn out, Senator.
Hulls?
I've been on some of those boats on the river, and they do get worn out. So for the safety of our wardens and those that we may be rescuing, we need to have good boats and good motors.
And this is the first budget cycle I've been through with Parks and Wildlife. I have not heard about oysters.
I was about to bring it up.
Too late. Too late.
Senator, I did not bring it up.
So you did not bring it up.
No, you brought it up, Senator.
It was an issue every cycle here for the last 6 years, I guess, 8 years. Y'all were trying to, there were fights over who's really over control of what under these bays for the oyster. But y'all were also buying oyster permits. Yep. What do you call it? I call it
licenses, buyback,
license,
commercial licenses, yes.
And so you were having trouble buying them. I think y'all were the only buyers, and you're running up the price all over. You were bidding against yourself, I think.
Yeah, well, that's the issue when there's when you're the only buyer, when you're a monopsony.
I'm going to just destroy her presentation.
Well,
she's going to have. So is the oyster problem pretty much settled down?
As I shared yesterday in Senate Water, I think we're at an inflection point.
Okay.
The rules, the statutes that this body has put in place over the last couple of sessions, the rules that our commission have adopted have really put us in a place to work forward with both the harvest industry, but also those that want to protect and restore oyster reefs. And so I think we're at that point now. I think we got a little bit more work to do, Senator, but we're there.
Thank you, Madam Chairman.
Yes, Senator Colcourse.
Thank you. I'll just start with the oysters and the buyback program. I think is really important. I was just going to ask, do you need UB authority? I think y'all have some money in there.
We're going to, for next.
I know that's ongoing.
It's ongoing.
The whole thing
yes.
for the members is there's a lot. There's too many licenses out there. Some would argue, and some of those are possessed in Louisiana, who come over here and take some of our oysters out of our Texas bays and estuaries. And
yeah, Senator, I can tell you we're going to need the ability moving into next session not to stop momentum that we're going to be making here.
That was really my question. And members, thank y'all for voting on some bills last session that help us protect some of those sensitive reefs, and mariculture and what we're doing out there. I know Representative Hunter and I work on those a lot, and we're really starting to see the fruits of the labor of some of these small businesses that are creating these abilities to grow oysters, and it's really cool. Super excited. And there's a market for it in our restaurants, so it correlates. I'm going to make a quick switch to ducks just for a quick second. Go back to that number that Senator Flores asked on the economic impact. Was that for deer hunting only? What was the deer hunting number?
9.6 billion for deer hunting.
9.6 billion
For deer hunting.
So if I were to add up, how, we have a lot of fishermen out here, both in our bays, in our state lakes, and in our private lakes. Y'all have a number for that?
Fishing, Senator, I have that number. I can get that back
Okay.
to you, but I can share.
Also, then bird hunting, and I mean we have upland bird, we have ducks, the migratory birds, quail, and I'd like to get that number overall because I mean this is a huge number for people that enjoy our great outdoors.
It is, and it's of concern to us, especially this last duck season. You may be hearing it from constituents that it's just it didn't come off like we had.
Let me tell you, I'm a duck hunter,
Yeah.
and it didn't come off like I had planned it.
Me too.
Right?
Yes.
I mean, it was terrible. So here's the real quick question: the duck stamp is a actual national. That's a national issue. So when you go to get your license, I get a super combo, but that gives me my fishing and my duck stamp. And that is the migratory bird kind of duck stamp. That money mostly goes to the feds. We get a little piece of it.
A little piece back from that, yeah.
Okay, so here's my question on that. It seems perhaps that our seasons are shifting just slightly. Okay, and I mean, that happens, I think, over time. And it seems like we start our duck season pretty early. And we end it, I think it's February the 22nd this year. Probably right. I see some nods back there. I'm close. I'm sorry, January 22nd. January 22nd, I'm sorry. I wish it was February 22nd. So I know, because I'd know what I would be doing this weekend. There seems to be some thoughts that we should go a little later. Start a little later, end a little later. Federal issue, state issue.
Federal issue, and we have an ability to move within a certain range, but it would be the feds. We would have to work with the feds to get that done.
So I look forward to working with y'all, to work with the feds, to look at these migratory patterns, to make sure that we're really in a good window. I think we go about as late as we can, but I'm very curious about this. And yes, it was a very disappointing duck season. And then lastly, on the deer issue, I appreciate all of the comments here. It is important that we get our ability to understand what's there. Obviously, we have deer breeders. They take, like oysters, that's a resource of the people of the state of Texas, owned by the people of the state of Texas constitutionally. And they grow bigger deer, and then we release them. We have stipulations around that. We've talked about this in water, agriculture, and rural affairs that it's in those enclosed, close breeding facilities that there seems to be, common sense. It might pass more quickly through a herd. I would just encourage us to continue to let the science drive that, okay? And it always seems that everybody's scared of, well, I don't want to get a study because it might not come out like I want on both sides, wherever you're coming down. And there seemingly could be a day when we look at other states, for example, Colorado, Pennsylvania. What are some other states that have struggled with this?
Wyoming, Wisconsin, yeah.
There's some
Arkansas,
states that have seen some, and come up with some really good facts that you move forward. And I know that you're working, and I think your commission's just recently voted, and it was an agreed to policy for the most part. So I look forward to working with you. It's an important part, and I'm going to throw in, this is my big pitch this year. We need to be studying river otters and the impact that they have on our lakes and our fisheries. They are really devastating. I know private waters, but if they're in the private waters so prolifically, they're going to be in our state waters as well, and what they're doing to our fish population. So either working with y'all or a university to do that study so that we can come up with good policy.
Senator, we're happy to work with you.
Thank you. Senator Flores, your light is still on. Is that just an
I was still thinking, Madam Chair.
That's okay, good. I know you're always thinking. Senator Hall, I see. I just want to make sure.
Quick request here. I'm just fascinated with 13 years of chasing CWD here in Texas, and no one has seen a deer die of CWD. If you happen to see one, would you give me a call, please? Take a picture and give me a call. Okay, thank you.
Okay, that concludes Texas Parks and Wildlife. Thank you all very much for being here. We appreciate
Thank you,
your
Chair.
input. Okay, Animal Health Commission, LBB presentation.